There is a quickness to it that feels strange, but it is what it is, and we have to make these decisions.
So right before Jed Hoyer and crew left for Japan, he did this presser with Marquis and a few of the reporters over there at Mesa, Arizona, Sloan Park. And I think it was really revealing. I thought it was really important topics to talk about. There's a few things that I'm going to go over. First of all, the decisions that were needed to be made and still to be made, the progression and the obstacles with Matt Shaw, the rebounding of Cade Horton, and then we're going to end with a little tidbit about Moises Ballesteros that I also thought was very revealing for where the organization thinks of him right now. So all this to say, I think it was really cool to see Jed Hoyer be a little bit more open about some of the decisions, the really tough decisions that he's had to make so early on in spring training. And that's what we're going to start with. Before we do, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you're liking this. And I always want to hear what you have to say. Make sure you comment down below. The goal is always the same. We all want to see the Cubs win a World Series, but you might disagree with some things, and that's okay. We can have some constructive back and forth in the comments. So let's go ahead and start with this very first comment, this very first idea that Jed Hoyer is discussing in regards to making decisions and also the depth of the team.
In some ways, this feels a little bit unnatural. Like we were making decisions and cuts and telling guys who are on the team on like a March 8th and 9th. Normally, these other teams are sort of in the middle of their spring training, so there is a quickness to it that feels strange. But it is what it is, and we have to make these decisions. And I feel good about the way guys have performed in camp.
I'm going to pause really quick there, and then we're going to continue the rest of this quote from him. But you can just see, you can kind of read through the lines here, read through the body language. This is not the norm. This is really, I want everyone to understand, just starting the season, call it 9 days early, essentially. They're starting on March 18th, and the very first game for the rest of this statewide opener is on the 27th, which is 9 days later. But they left on March 12th. March 11th. That means that he had to make decisions 16 days earlier. That's 16 days of not being able to see the way that guys perform. That's 16 days of wondering, would this guy have made the team if the health of someone went downhill. The decision of Nicky Lopez, for example, and releasing him. Does John Birdie get hurt? Does Vidal Brunhan get hurt? Does Matt Shaw get the oblique tweaked again? And then he looks in and says, gosh, because we had to make that decision 16 days earlier than we really needed to because of this Japan trip, we wish we would have kept Nicky Lopez around. Travis Jankowski, and just in case you didn't know, he went to the White Sox. Who else? You've got Jankowski. You've got Nicky Lopez. You've got Keegan Thompson was just released recently. What would it have looked like if Keegan Thompson had another, call it 3 or 4 games where he was able to show his stuff in spring training? This is all stuff, and I think Keegan's in a little bit of a different situation. They didn't have to let him go quite yet, but you know that they needed a 40-man spot open for one of these guys going to Japan. These are all decisions that, due to the Japan series, which is still a lot of fun, it's a great team-building exercise. It's great for bringing more fans to the MLB from Japan. It's great for a lot of reasons, but it's very difficult for the two teams that have to go there and make these decisions. Let's continue to listen to Jed.
We're deeper. I think there's no question. I think, like I said, I knew we were going to have to make some hard decisions, and we're going to probably keep having to make hard decisions as we go. But I feel like we have a lot of young talent in AAA. So I do think that when we have the inevitable injuries or inevitable poor performance, I do think that we have some guys that aren't on this trip that are going to play a big role. And I think that's a big part of the messaging when you bring these guys in and they're disappointed they're not going or disappointed they're not on the team or getting optioned. It's like we all know, there's players that got sent out early that are going to have a major impact on this team. We see it every single year.
So the big thing here is he has more decisions to be made. And there's 2 that I think are really going to be the difficult ones here. Gage Workman and Brad Keller. Now, Gage Workman I don't think is as difficult of a decision. If you look at it, assuming that March 27th, Nico Horner is back, then John Birdie goes to the bench. You got Justin Turner as another backup infielder, and then you have Carson Kelly essentially as your backup for Miguel Amaya. That leaves one more bench spot, 4 bench spots, and Gage Workman makes the most sense. You can say whatever you want about Vidal Brujan having a nice spring, but he has struggled recently. The average is down close to 200. All he really brings to the table is speed, if we're being completely honest, where Gage Workman, by the way, underrated speed, I believe had 30 stolen bags last year in Double-A, plus the glove, plus the power bat. Yeah, he strikes out a bunch, but oh well. That's a lot of tools that you really like. Let's say the first couple of weeks of the year he doesn't perform. Well, he's a Rule 5 guy. It's not as easy as just sending him down to AAA because that's not an option. If you say, hey, we don't think you're a value to this team right now at the big league club, he has to go back to Detroit. Detroit has the option of paying the Cubs $50,000 and saying, yeah, we take him back. I believe if they don't pay the $50,000, the Cubs do have the option to now have a minor league contract, if I'm correct. But that is a pretty big decision for a guy that has some tools that you really, really like. So there's pressure on Rule 5 guys. Hector Rondon, for those of you that don't remember, he was a Rule 5 guy. He produced. It was an easy decision for him to stay up in 2015 with the Cubs because he was producing. If a Rule 5 guy does not produce, that becomes an incredibly difficult decision. And, of course, this is more in season. That's why I say it's not as difficult of a decision, because I do believe March 27th, Gage Workman is on this team. Brad Keller is a different situation. When you have 8 bullpen guys and so many of them already do not have options, Brad Keller has this domino effect of, okay, if he's on the team, maybe Ben Brown is optioned. Maybe we already probably imagine Jordan Wicks is going to be optioned. Maybe Tyson Miller has to be DFA'd. This is the domino effect of a guy that has not pitched well in the major leagues really since, I believe, 2020 is the last time he had a legitimate season. And you're assuming, okay, he's throwing 97, 98 again, whereas last year was 94, 95 by all reports. That's worth giving a shot. I've said it before, you hate to see it that you DFA or you say, hey, we want to send you back down to the minors, and then he options to get out of his contract because he does have an option to get out of that and to go and try it somewhere else. You hate to see that, and then he goes to the Brewers, and then he's shoving against the Cubs. You hate to see that, of course. But when you give this opportunity to a guy, if he doesn't produce, and then you think, oh man, well, we could have had Ben Brown up. Maybe Tyson Miller actually was going to figure things out and be that same 2.15 ERA guy he was last year for the Cubs. There is a domino effect that has to happen if Brad Keller is on this team. I do not think this is as difficult of a decision if he has a full spring training to go through. But because of this March 11th decision of putting him on the 40-man and then seeing him in a couple games, maybe seeing him in a game, maybe not seeing him in a game in Japan. Either way, you see less games, you see less reps from him, and it makes it a much more difficult decision come March 27th. All right, that's it for the decisions. Let's now hear what he has to say about Matt Shaw.
Yeah, he's got a pretty slow heartbeat, and that's going to be tested, But even when we told him he was on the team, and his reaction was super appropriate for the moment. Like, he wasn't, overwhelmed by the moment. I think the nice thing with him is I think he feels like, okay, I'll savor this moment and then I'll move on to the next thing in a way, where I think that's how he's wired. And, he's not the biggest guy. I think he's been proving people wrong a little bit. I think he knows what he believes makes him really good, and he's going to stick to that. And I give him a lot of credit for that.
So this is really cool because I do feel like I have some insight on this as well, going to spring training, having Matt on my channel before spring training, getting to know him a little bit, having multiple conversations. I think the slow heartbeat is a really good description. I think maturity was the word that came to mind for me. Very mature beyond his years, 23 years old, I think. Feels like you're talking to a 35-year-old, to be completely honest. So it doesn't surprise me that when he finds out, hey, you're on the team, that he's just kind of like, cool. Like, he expects that. That knowing the guy, talking to the guy, he expects to be on the opening day roster. This isn't like the guy that gets called into the office and is wondering if he's coming up or not, and then finds out he is, and he gets super emotional, and he's like, I can't believe it, I'm living out my dream. Like, Matt Shaw is just like, no, this is business as usual. This was the next step. And that's really exciting. It's also exciting when asked about his routine at the end there, you heard him say, hey, he knows what works for him. He knows what makes him successful. The question leading up to that was, hey, he's kind of unorthodox. He's got the leg kick. He maybe doesn't have the arm for third base that everyone wants him to have. And that's where Jed said, hey, he just goes out and he does his thing and he knows what makes him successful. I have not seen anything from spring training that has led me to believe that Matt Shaw does not have the arm for third base. Let me know what you think in the comments. There's not been a single play. He's had a couple on the run. He's had a couple slow ground balls that he had to come in and charge on, throw off balance, and still makes a play. Nothing to me, except for reports from maybe a year or two ago of him having more of a second baseman's arm. Nothing to me currently looks like this guy is going to struggle at third base. It's unorthodox. I posted a reel. I posted some highlights of Matt Shaw the other day when I was at spring training. A lot of people were like, oh, he has a weird throwing motion. It works for him. The leg kick works for him. The things that he does at standing at 5'8", whatever height he is, it works for him. He's figured out he's the Dustin Pedroia of the Cubs, hopefully. I don't want to put that much pressure on him, but Dustin Pedroia had a lot of unorthodox things, including his swing, and it freaking worked for him. So if it works for Matt Shaw, he doesn't need to go out there and try to be something that he's not, and that's the encouraging thing. So put this man on the 40-man roster, put this man on the 26-man roster. Let's just get this Matt Shaw era going. Now let's hear about Cade Horton, and this is an exciting topic to me.
He just needs to pitch. I mean, he missed a lot of time last year. He needs to just go pitch and pitch healthy. I think that the stuff is there right now. That's clear. I think that the command is not where it was in 23, and I think that's just knocking off some of that rust and getting back to, just filling the strike zone the way he has in the past and locating. So I think he would say the same thing. I don't think he feels like he's back to where he was at the end of 23, but I think he's on the right path. And clearly the velocity, the slider are all there. It's just a matter of kind of refining some things. And it makes sense. He hasn't been on a mound as much, and so I think this being on the mound and making starts will refine those things quickly, and he'll be back to where he was.
Two things about this. First of all, I think it is very easy to forget that Cade Horton just a year ago had so much hype to come in and be a potential ace in the middle of the season for the Cubs. Do I think he's actually going to be an ace, especially in his first year? No, I don't think that. I mean, Greg Maddux, one of the best pitchers of all times, was not very good in his first year with the Cubs. So to put that kind of pressure on him still it doesn't make sense. But it is easy for us to forget, oh yeah, Cade Horton was supposed to be the man last year. And why don't we have that same mentality? Well, because it's easy to forget about guys like that. It's easy to forget that, like, hey, this guy was going to be something and then he got injured, and then we're just conditioned to think like, okay, well, there goes that prospect, on to the next one. That's not the situation here, I believe, with Cade Horton. I believe his stuff is still incredible. I believe his desire to want to be successful is there more than ever. And for Jed Hoyer to also address this and say, like, hey, he just needs innings. He needs to pitch again because he didn't do much of that last year is really encouraging. And if he can do that, if he can be healthy, then call him up in the middle of the season and be that great surprise, that cherry on top that we didn't expect. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the way that he talked about Cade Horton reminds me a lot of Ben Brown. And although Ben Brown has pitched a lot in spring training versus Cade Horton not pitching so much in spring training, he just made his first appearance the other day, got a save. We didn't see a whole lot from him while I was there. So he feels like he's probably a step behind Ben Brown, but the way in which Jed talks about this process of he needs more innings, he needs more reps, he needs to pitch again, concerns me that maybe he's thinking the same thing for Ben Brown, and Ben Brown might start the season in AAA based on this same mindset. I don't want to see that. I want to see Ben Brown in the majors to start the season, to be, whether it's fifth starter or be in the bullpen as a long man or be there in high leverage situations or earn those high leverage situations, whatever that looks like, I want him on the team. What do you want? Let me know in the comments. My fear is he starts in AAA based on just needing reps. Now, the final little piece here is Cubs' top prospect, one of the top prospects, Moises Ballesteros, and where Jed sees him in the organization right now.
Yeah, it's imbalanced. I mean, I think he can really hit, as you see in spring training. His hitting is beyond his catching, but so hard to find catching in baseball now. It's so hard to find catchers that can hit. And so we have to be patient with the catching part. He's really young. I think, he's the youngest guy in camp, and he's playing a position that requires real maturity. And so we have to be patient with that.
The dude can't even go into a bar yet. I don't think he's turned 21 yet. We have to remind ourselves of that. We want him to be up here. We want him to be hitting. We see the swing. We see the results in spring training. Watching him hit at spring training, it was like a video game for him. He's out there. He's having fun. He just knows he's going to get a hit. At one point, I think he was like 5 for 6 against live pitchers in the first 6 at-bats I saw from him, one of them being a home run and a couple being deep fly balls that almost went out as well. He's so much fun to watch at the plate, and the swing is so effortless. And for a guy that's 5'8", again, a Matt Shaw type of profile, a short guy you don't expect that kind of power from, and it comes out and you're just like, wow. It's such a fun thing to watch in person. I really hope that all of you get the chance to see him hit in person, because it's really an exciting thing. But the catching does need – this is the first time that we've heard someone actually address this. There's always been these whispers. There's always been these things of like, ooh, maybe he's a little bit behind on his catching. For Jed Hoyer to come out and say the catching is just not where the hitting is, we now know where they stand on all this. And the reality of this, what it comes down to is A, patience, and B, sometimes that patience may not result in him wearing a Major League Baseball Cubs uniform at Wrigley Field. Ever. That's the reality. Because just like we saw with the Kyle Tucker trade, some teams would rather invest in guys that they know still have work to do because they see what they can do in the future, whereas other teams need to win now. The Cubs are in a win now mentality, which allows them, to me, this is an advantage because they don't need catching right now. They have 2 great catchers. As long as they stay healthy, we're good. So you can bring up Moises Ballesteros when it makes sense. You can bring him up and let him develop a little bit more by catching 1 game every 10 days and DHing 2 of those 10 days. But there's also this idea of, well, if that opportunity never comes, if there is not a need for him to be able to be up in the big league club, and suddenly we need some starting pitching at the trade deadline, and this team that we're doing a deal with for the Marlins, there's been a lot of talk about Sandy Alcantara. The Marlins are rebuilding. They see Moises Ballesteros. They say, if you want Sandy Alcantara, we want Moises Ballesteros. Guess what, guys? At some level, that might be the play. So patience, the Cubs have that on their side. It's good to hear Jed Hoyer talk about Moises Ballesteros and the fact that, like, hey, we just need to be patient with him and remind ourselves that he's not even 21 years old yet. The sad part is that if that patience is taking a little bit too long, if that development doesn't quite make it, then at some point, the value of Moises Ballesteros might be more in the trade market. Again, I don't want that. I like Moises a lot. Had a great conversation with him because my wife is a translator. If you guys missed that interview, I'll put it down below. A really awesome dude. That's the difficult thing about the business of baseball. A lot of these guys are awesome. Nicky Lopez is really an awesome human being. Travis Jankowski is an awesome human being. But at some level, it's a business. And so let me know what you think. Not what you want, but what you think. Do you think that the Cubs will view Moises Ballesteros as a potential trade piece by the deadline, or do you think that he'll be up making an impact with the team? All right, that's my reaction on Jed Hoyer's presser. Can't wait for the games to start. On March 18th, we'll be doing a watch-along right here on the Setup Man YouTube channel. I'm going to go put my arm on ice, Setup Nation. We'll see you later.